Okay, so now that you have the basics of utilitarianism down, I just want to walk you through how you would use this theory to apply to a case. That's going to be your first writing assignment for me, is applying utilitarianism and another theory to a case that you're going to choose. So using the example case that I gave you for today of Tom and Carol, I want you to do the application on your own, but I want to kind of walk you through what I would expect in terms of a complete application of the theory to the case. Okay, so there are some steps you need to make sure you go through when you're applying utilitarianism. And if you were to skip any of these steps, then on an essay, for example, then I would definitely want to say that you didn't completely apply the theory to the case. So the first step is to assess who is involved in the situation, who's going to be affected by this person's actions. Since we've got a theory that's based on consequences, and since we've got a theory based on creating the greatest good for the greatest number of people, figuring out what people are involved is going to be a big part of this process. So you want to make sure that you don't overlook anybody and that you look beyond the sort of the main person in the case and, maybe one other person. So with Tom and Carol, obviously those are the two main people in the case who might be affected. There are probably some other people who would be affected by Tom's decision making as well. Then you want to assess all the options. What are the available courses of action for this person, whoever does this making the decision? And then what you want to do is predict the possible or the reasonably predictable consequences of all the options. So you need to do that in order to show which choice is going to create the most happiness in comparison to the other choices. So the biggest mistake that people make in essays when they're applying utilitarianism to a case is that they only describe the consequences of the course of action that they recommend, that they think a utilitarian would recommend. And if you only describe the consequences of that one course of action, then you haven't done the job of showing me that that course of action is better, is going to produce better consequences, is going to maximize happiness more than the other choices. All I know is what would happen if this one course of action were chosen. So make sure that once you think about all the possible courses of action that are reasonable, then the next step is to predict the consequences of all of those possibilities in order to show that the possibility that you recommend is better than the others. So then you're going to choose the option that best fulfills the greatest happiness principle. It's a principle that says we're acting to create the greatest good for the greatest number. So without step 3, you don't have a lot of backup for step 4. So when you're thinking about how a utilitarian would advise Tom, in the case of Tom and Carol, remember to focus on consequences. Don't focus on what a jerk you think Tom is or any other aspects of the theory of the case besides what is likely to happen if he does X, Y, or Z. Remember to think about everyone that you can reasonably expect to be affected by Tom's choice. Think beyond the main 2 characters. And don't create a false dilemma. In other words, if you're thinking about this in terms of 2 opposite choices, that means you're probably creating a false dilemma. There may be more options than either lie or tell the truth, or tell Carol or don't tell. So if you were to construe it in purely black and white terms as doing either one or 2 of a set of opposites, then you probably need to look at whether you're creating a false dilemma. Also, don't get distracted. The question is what Tom should do now, not how he should have behaved in the past. And then finally, keep in mind that your goal is to maximize happiness in utilitarianism, but if you can't do that, then you're to choose the course of action that minimizes pain or unhappiness.